Hidden for centuries inside the depths of this coastal cavern, a notorious pirate shipwreck has been found. Lore has it that chests of plunder went down with a swashbuckling captain. Is the treasure cursed? Has it already been looted? Excavation is underway, but there's still a lot to uncover, so let's dig into this sketch all about the pleura. Between the lungs and the ribs lies the pleura, a membrane with an extra slippery surface to allow the lungs to slide easily as they expand and contract. Though continuous with each other, there are really two parts to this membrane, called the visceral and parietal pleura. Their slippery sides are usually pressed right up against each other, allowing the lungs to glide easily. This creates an empty space, kind of like the inside of a bag, but we'll talk more about this later. The visceral pleura covers the surface of the lungs, following the curves and fissures of the lobes. Sails are our recurring symbol for lungs, and this tarp draped over the exposed sails represents the visceral pleura. Just one of those archaeologist precautions. To recall the term visceral, which refers to viscera, as in organs, we've left this dead fish snagged in the sail rigging. Fish even kind of sounds like vis, a clue to help you remember that the visceral pleura covers organs, in this case, the lungs. The other part is the parietal pleura, which sounds kind of like pirate-ole, hence the skeletal remains of this pirate ship. Its exposed ribs are covered by another pleural tarp. The parietal pleura covers the wall of the thorax and the surface of everything else that the lungs come into contact with. Each part is named for the surface it covers. The costal pleura covers the ribs, the mediastinal pleura covers the mediastinum, and the diaphragmatic pleura covers the diaphragm. Unlike the visceral pleura, the parietal pleura does sense pain. The pain is well localized, and this can be helpful to diagnose lung conditions. The costal pleura is innervated by the intercostal nerves, which run along the bottom of the ribs, like these yellow wires. On the other hand, the mediastinal and diaphragmatic pleura are innervated by the phrenic nerve, which also supplies motor function to the diaphragm. Think of this thick yellow wire illuminating the mast and its base area to remember the regions that the phrenic nerve innervates. To top it off, this French spelunker of ours is sliding down the phrenic wire to claim his share of the gloria. More about the phrenic nerve in the next sketch, but a brief reminder that when it senses pain, it actually refers this pain to sensory regions in the distribution of its nerve roots C3, 4, and 5. So to the patient, it feels like sharp pain at the base of the neck and shoulder area that worsens with inhalation. This excavation is going to take more than a cavalier caver, and a team from the Intercostal Dive Company is already getting their hands dirty. This electrical worker, snipping at intercostal wire, represents a nerve block. Recall that the intercostal nerves run in a neurovascular bundle underneath the ribs in the subcostal groove. Nerve blocks here can help with costal pleural pain, such as from tumors invading the chest wall and parietal pleura. Finally, some treasure. Wait a second. This treasure chest is empty? Ugh, typical. It's tough to keep a lucrative secret from prying eyes around here. A reminder that typically there's nothing in the bag-like space between the two membranes, called the pleural space, except a bit of fluid and an overall negative pressure. Unfortunately, the pleural space can get filled with air, called a pneumothorax. This occurs when either pleura is torn and air leaks into the pleural space. A pneumothorax can happen from trauma or spontaneously, when a collection of air between the lungs and pleura ruptures, aka a bleb. Blebs can be normal or associated with emphysema. This treasure chest looked promising, at least when it was still unopened underwater, but it's filled with air. The easiest way to diagnose a pneumothorax is with an X-ray. We've added a little pirate flag to remind you, and you'll see this pirate symbol for X-rays throughout the rest of Sketchy. The pirate curse continues. The pleural space can also fill with fluid, so this last treasure chest is filled with fluid. In general, it's called a pleural effusion. It can be a lot or a little, which is going to impact what they look like on X-ray. Depending on the fluid, there are other names, like hemothorax for blood, chylothorax for chyle, parapneumonic effusion for an effusion from pneumonia. You get the idea. These are all treated very differently, so it's important to know exactly what's causing the fluid. Thoracentesis is a procedure in which a needle is used to enter the pleural space and collect the fluid. This archaeologist is using a lab flask to scoop up a sample of fluid from this chest as a reminder of the thoracentesis procedure. The fluid can then be sent for testing, making this a diagnostic test. It can also be therapeutic, as removing lots of fluid can improve a patient's symptoms. Just like spelunking for treasure, thoracentesis isn't without risks. Accessing the fluid requires a sharp needle, and you don't want to injure the lung and cause a pneumothorax. It's important to sample the pleura below the level of the lungs. Thankfully, the parietal pleura extends below the lungs by about 2 rib spaces, and this is where thoracentesis should happen. Keep in mind this 2-foot tape measure stretched out between the parietal pleura pirate ship and the fluid-filled chest. Whoa! Look out! Better get these priceless artifacts out of here before this modern-day pirate makes off with what little loot there is. At a dig site like this, danger lurks around every corner. One can never be too careful. A good reminder that thoracentesis can injure upper abdominal organs below the 9th rib. We're talking stomach, spleen, and liver. Hence, this livery-shaped artifact tagged with a number 9. All right, we better climb on out of here. That harpoon looks a little too sharp for my liking. Let's sum things up quick. The lungs are surrounded by the pleura, so they glide easily during breathing. The visceral pleura is attached to the lung surface and is insensate, while the parietal pleura is attached to the ribs, mediastinum, and diaphragm, and is quite sensitive, being innervated by the intercostal nerves and the phrenic nerve. The pleural space is usually empty, but in pneumothorax it's filled with air, and in pleural effusion it's filled with fluid. This fluid can be collected by thoracentesis, which is both diagnostic and therapeutic. Well, this sketch illuminated a lot about the pleura, but alas, it would seem the conniving captain of this once fierce pirate-old schooner has had the last laugh, and taken the treasure with him.